शारदा शारदाम्बोजवदना वदनाम्बुजे सर्वदा सर्वदास्माकं सन्निधिं क्रियात् सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां हरिः ओम्। नित्यप्रातस्मरणीयानां पूज्यपादानां श्री चिन्मयानंद महास्वामिनां पादारविन्दौ आदौ मम नमस्कारान् समर्प्य अद्य अत्र उपस्थिताः सन्तमहाजनाः बहवः तत्र सन्ति। अत्र संस्कृतपण्डिताः, व्याकरणपण्डिताः, चिन्मयविश्वविद्यालयस्य अध्यापकाः, वेदान्तविषये ये अभिमानिनः सर्वेषाम् अपि मम नमस्कारान्। It's indeed my privilege and blessing to be here. I don't think I can use any other word. Ever since today morning, thanks to the grace of Pujya Gurudev, we are all immersing ourselves in the Vedantic thinking from the morning. In fact, when this conference was announced, I was extremely happy for the topic. You have spirituality, education, patriotism. All that we have to do is to read the pledge of Pujya Gurudev. In the Chinmaya mission, we have the pledge. It has all these three. The 3 paragraphs will find these 3. So I was very happy that we had a very appropriate title for this conference. This session is about spirituality. There is a general feeling. There is a general feeling in this country, of course all over the world it has always been there, but in this country, that why do we need spirituality? Or another version of it is, why do we need it now? We'll think about it later. This gathering is a different gathering. This is not a sample. I am saying in the society there is this feeling. Why do we need spirituality? In fact, the basic premise of Pujya Gurudev's work and the work carried out by Chinmaya mission is to destroy this thought, is to answer this question fundamentally. Why do we need spirituality? That is the entire mission's work, starting from Pujya Gurudev, can be summarized in one sentence. Everybody needs spirituality here and now. That is the mission. So therefore, that is the trajectory on which we may have to go. So on this occasion, I want to only strengthen that thought, a little bit of that thought. I just want to strengthen that. See, there was a German philosopher by name Schopenhauer. He wrote a book in German in 1802, which was, I think, translated into English in 1852. It's called World as Will and Representation. That's the name of the book, English version of the book. I am reminded of one sentence there. He says, now that mankind has achieved everything, security and welfare, they become problem themselves. Like that, there is one sentence. That summarizes a problem which the mankind will continue to face and will look for some solutions. Because today you take this country, paying a utility bill is not difficult. Paying your corporation tax is not difficult. Renewing your license is not difficult. Doing banking is not difficult. We can use some internet, handheld device, everything we can do. What is becoming difficult is people become problem themselves. That is what it is. So this is where the crux of spirituality lies. I happened to visit a factory in Belgaum, in Karnataka. And there was a very interesting reason why I visited. There was a panel discussion like this. There was a managing director of a Japanese company called Yuken. They manufacture pumps. This gentleman by name Rangachar, he was sitting by my side. So some other speaker was talking, so we were just sitting. I was generally asking him, how are things, how is the competition, how are things? This business school professor will ask only these questions. I was generally asking him. He said, sir, there is one company called Polyhydron, which is in, Belgaum. They are making us run for our money. I said, why? I don't know, sir. For the last 15 years, they have not increased the price. They are absolutely fabulous. Then I started finding out that company run by a gentleman by name Suresh Hundre. That is the company which 100% works on spirituality. Nothing more. Pure spirituality. So I finally landed there. Because I wanted to go and understand what spirituality in business. I was astonished by everything I saw there. As I was about to enter into the factory, there were no security, nothing. So it was a new anubhava for me. But anyway, there was a portico. I thought that's the way to enter into this factory. As I was about to enter into the factory, casually I turned left. There was one shoe stand and there was one notice there. Please leave your shoes and ego here before you enter. That is how it was written. What I am saying, spirituality makes eminent sense in business. I wrote a very nice article about him, all about that very detailed analysis and all that. So spirituality makes eminent sense in business. Today, the most important topic in business world all over the world is what is called workplace spirituality. Now everybody is saying this emotional quotient, spiritual IQ, all are over. Over in the sense they are all fine. They are saying we need spiritual quotient. Workplace spirituality is a very, very big issue now. So therefore, that spirituality is something that is not required now, let us think about it later, is a very primitive thinking. It is the finest expression of ignorance. Because the anubhava, the reality in the world is emerging slightly differently. Now, I don't have to go that far. Let us look at the Upodghata of Bhagavad Gita. Acharya Bhagavatpada's Upodghata. Dvavido vedokto dharmaha pravritti lakshano nivritti lakshanascha jagataha sthiti karanam sakshat praninam abhyudaya nishreyasa hetuh. Very beautifully he said, what you need in Veda, there are these two dharmas being told, pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma. And what is this nivritti dharma? Today people are not able to come home and sleep. They work, get a 7-digit salary, come back and spend 6-digit in healthcare. And which 6-digit I do not know. That depends on what state of spiritual evolution we are in. That is the situation. That is what Bhagavad said. You need pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma. In this modern parlance, we have swung the pendulum towards pravritti dharma. Nivritti dharma, people are saying, one gentleman told me, sir, after I retire, I will become spiritual. I said, that is not possible. You cannot come today, after working for 40 years, come home and sleep. Tomorrow morning you get up all with spirituality. That is only Mayajal. That is impossible. Spirituality is an investment. As much as there is an investment for everything. For pravritti dharma, if you need an investment, you need an investment for nivritti dharma also. That is what Bhagavad Gita said. Now, Pujya Gurudev's educational perspectives, the man-making education which we are talking about, if you have to summarize it, this is the only way you can summarize. That every individual must be fully equipped with pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma at an early age of his or her life. That only will give us a way to go in this, travel in this path of pravritti and also see nivritti. That spiritual part is an essential element of our education. Pujya Gurudev's educational art of man-making can be summarized like that. That is the very spirit of education. That is the very spirit of... So the education today, since all these are there, I am putting all of them into my perspective of spirituality. The education today, I recollect the days when we started this Chinmaya Vidyapeeth, the hours and hours of discussion I used to have with the Swamijis. We finally came to a certain understanding at that point in time very clearly. Today's education is inputs for living. Ya vidya sa niyuktaye, not vimuktaye, niyuktaye, some niyukti. Everything is driven by placement model. You have to get something so that the students are placed. It is not, I am not saying that is bad, but you cannot have an education which tells only that. Inputs for living is important. I am not ridiculing it. I am not talking less of it. But what I am saying is inputs for living must be complemented with inputs for life. We need both. In fact, the founding ideas of Chinmaya Vidyapeeth was there. Why did we think of IKS 5 years ahead of NEP 2020? Because these long discussions, the vision that the Swamijis brought to the table, which we had been constantly thinking, made it very clear to us. Inputs for living is important, but the education of man-making is something which has inputs for life also. That inputs for life is what spirituality is all about. That is where the practical aspect of spirituality comes into existence, according to me. This is how I think we must operationalize spirituality. Otherwise, spirituality will become an idea. Spirituality can be thought about of many other things. Now, anyway, what is this spirituality? Before we operationalize it, what is this spirituality? In my own understanding, I find 4 dimensions which make up spirituality. A person who travels on the path of spirituality at a fairly early age in his life, if that person, he or she can understand this comprises spirituality, these 4 dimensions, I think we have invested. The first dimension is the belief in transcendence. There is a larger force. This is very important. There is a larger force. Science is extremely important, but science has addressed a very tiny piece of the tip of the iceberg. There are a million things which we do not know, and we should have the grace to understand we do not know, and there is something of a larger scheme of things. Rita. Satyam cha ritam cha satyam abhavat is what he says after he created the world in Taittiriyopanishad. That's what he said. Right? So it is belief in transcendence is a very important milestone in one's spiritual journey. Second, spirituality means understanding deeply the notion of interconnectedness. That is the axis of spirituality. The Sarvatma Bhava, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, Nehana Nasti Kinchana. That's what it is. And our Upanishads are extolling that idea again and again everywhere. Yaha iha naneva pashyati mrityoho saha mrityum apnoti. That person who has fail to understand that the world is one, will only go through the cycle of birth and death. That's what Kathopanishad says anyway. So the interconnectedness is the second dimension of spirituality. I think our journey in spirituality must invest into this experiential understanding of the interconnectedness, because that is the axis of spirituality. There is a third dimension of spirituality which follows from interconnectedness, which I call it as compassion and love. That is what we see in great masters. Ahetuka Daya Sindhu is the definition of a guru in Viveka Chudamani. The greatest thing we see with every great master that we have read and seen and experienced is infinite compassion and love. That is the third dimension of spirituality. If we are not there, we are not reached the third milestone of spirituality. So it is compassion and love, which logically flows from a sense of interconnectedness. And lastly, I think all these will also grow in us a sense of purpose and meaning in life. These are the four dimensions of spirituality. We must be able to grow these dimensions in every individual. An educational system must also endear for it, must invest in growing these dimensions in the minds of people. Then there is a possibility that we are able to give them the Nivritti Dharma along with the Pravritti Dharma. Because that is what is required for, Nishreyas. Abhyudaya is important, but we need Nishreyas also. How can we just stop with Abhyudaya? We need materialism, but we need mental peace, a sense of fulfillment. That is also equally required. Therefore, that is very, very important. Now, this whole journey of spirituality is the only hope for creating finest individuals in mankind. That is why our great masters were talking about it. If somebody is able to imbibe spirituality, that feeling and that expression of spirituality, I think they will understand the inner world determines everything that happens in the outer world. I keep saying this very often. If a person cannot be happy, there is no way that person can make anybody happy. If a person is not inspired, that person cannot inspire anybody in the world. If a person cannot communicate to himself or herself, he or she cannot communicate to anyone. Everything starts inside. That is what the spirituality actually enables us with. And that was the central problem for Arjuna. The Bhagavad Gita's chapter 1 starts only with that. A great warrior who is called Savyasachin. He just needs only his left hand. A great warrior wants to drop everything and run away because the inner world collapsed. It's all about developing that strength of character that comes only through an investment in spirituality. Spirituality develops broad-mindedness. What does this interconnectedness do? It develops broad-mindedness and compassion. I think these are very, very important values with which we have to build a society. A society which is an enduring society requires this kind of thing. Now, I have gone through many of these Pujya Gurudev's writings through that Art of Man-Making, which were serialized into a book. Finally, it came in the form of a book. I have gone through some of the workings of writings of Swami Vivekananda, and all the great masters have a great sense of congruence in this idea. There were no 2-3 different views in this particular idea. That you have to create great individuals who are endowed with skills for living and skills for life. Now, I just want to end by saying that a spiritually evolved person comes with certain attributes which distinguishes that person from everyone. So I identified 4 attributes. I just want to share that. And these attributes, what we see normally in two opposite camps, will come together in the same place. The first attribute, a spiritually evolved Vyakti. In that person, you will find that gentleness and strength will coexist. Both will coexist. So today, what do we say? If somebody is strength, it is Dadagiri. I mean, he can bulldoze, he can do this. Gentleness, oh, nice person, let him sit in the last row. This kind of a mental model people have. A person who is spiritually evolved will have strength and gentleness will coexist in the same person. Right? A person who has, spirituality, faith and broad-mindedness will coexist. Again, we see it in two different camps. People think faith is anti to broad-mindedness. I don't know where from this idea came. A spiritually evolved person will bring faith and deep conviction and broad-mindedness to the table. That person will be both. A person who is spiritually evolved will have compassion and fearlessness. Both will be together. This is again, we think people who have compassion are a little fearful or something like that, but people who are fearless are not compassionate at all. That's not true. That's why in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, after that long conversation between Janaka and Yajnavalkya, finally Yajnavalkya says, Abhayam vai praptosi Janaka. You have truly become fearless. So the fearlessness and compassion must grow together. Now at the end of all that, and this is what Pujya Gurudev, all these great spiritual masters have been articulating in different ways, because this kind of a character we need to build. In that lies the hope for a nation and a society to prosper. That is the patriotism part of it. That's how the nation prospers, the society becomes very resilient, the society becomes very strong. Finally, a spiritually evolved person would have gathered enormous capability to handle nonsense in life. Life brings a lot of nonsense. Life is not like what very nicely we are taught in a school or in a college. No, life is full of nonsense. Because agamapaino anityaha, that tam titikshasva bharata, that mentality will come only because of spirituality. Therefore, I think an institution like Chinmaya Vidyapeeth, our founding ideas were firmly on this. We wanted to go by the vision of Pujya Gurudev, which wanted to instill this, that we build people with strength of character, with skills to match and see the world and win the world, but a strength of character, a deep sense of conviction and belief in our great cultural heritage. I think all these must come together, and that is why I think spirituality makes eminent sense. And I take this opportunity to once again thank Gauri Amma and everybody for considering me to come here and participate in this nice conference. I am blessed and I am thankful for all that. Thank you.